Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. Sleepy Eve's harvest parade paused at midnight like the town was holding its breath. Paper pumpkins swayed on wire, fog pressed low, thick as a secret. A woman in a velvet cape smiled for a photo, fingers at the little ribboned necklace they'd given the honorees, tight against the throat like a promise. Something brushed the back of her heel. Straw. Just straw. From the corn maze across the road came a sound like a scythe being pulled through wet grass. The crowd laughed too loud because fear hates silence, and the mayor raised his hand for the countdown. 10, 9, 8. A whisper moved the fog, not words, more like burlap thinking. The woman's necklace ticked just a tiny crack no one else heard, and the ribbon slackened, her smile dimmed. She lifted her hand too late. 7, 6, 5. Between the stalks, Hexa turned her stitched face, black voids for eyes, a seam for a mouth held shut with black pins. The scythe's blade caught the orange lights and threw them back like small suns. 4, 3. The velvet cape woman's head tilted, then gently, terribly, kept going. It didn't fly, it didn't roll. It slid, as if the air itself had hands. The crowd didn't scream at first. They tried to make the shape make sense. By the time someone dropped their caramel apple, fog had already tucked the body away like a bad idea. 2, 1. Somewhere in the corn, straw rustled, a polite curtsy. The parade music started again, cheerful and wrong, while the mayor shouted for everyone to keep moving. On the pavement, only a thin red smile remained where the ribbon had kissed goodbye. And in a rental house 3 streets over, 3 new museum managers, Randy, Graves, Sola, raised plastic cups to their dream job, fingering their welcome gifts around their throats. "Told you this town goes all in," Graves said. Outside, a scythe drew a neat line through fog no one noticed. Sleepy Eve looked like a postcard someone had left in the fog too long. Cute, damp, and a little warped. Hand-painted signs, a clock that chimed slow, pumpkins sweating on stoops. The Halloween Museum rose at the end of Maine like a church that had married a carnival. Gingerbread trim, iron weather vane shaped like a scythe, windows full of smiling skeletons. "Home," Graves said, hauling the last box from the hatchback. 35, all sarcasm and impulse buys, he wore his new manager badge like a dare. Randy, 32, curls tucked in a bandana, stared up at the facade. "If one animatronic winks at me, I'm charging it rent." Sola, 33, was already filming a slow pan. Day 1, 3 idiots inherit a haunted Etsy emporium. What could go wrong? The mayor materialized from the fog with a salesman's grin and a coat that wanted to be important. "Welcome, welcome." He shook hands like he wished they were votes. The town sheriff ambled 2 steps behind, broad, polite, eyes that counted exits. "You're just in time for the season." Inside, the museum breathed dust and cinnamon, glass cases, antique masks, tin noisemakers, a row of sickle silver scythes tagged with little plaques, an entire hall of scarecrows, some cute, some too accurate, lined like jurors. "This is gorgeous," Randy admitted. One of the straw faces seemed to follow her. She told herself it was the lighting. The mayor clapped. "Tradition time." From a velvet tray, he offered 3 ribbon necklaces, black silk threaded through a tiny onyx charm shaped like a wheat grain. "Our heritage ribbons. Sleepy Eve pride. Wear them until after Halloween. Good luck, good business, all that." The chuckle didn't reach his eyes. Graves looped his on with theatrical flourish. "If I turn into a bat, I'm billing you." "You'd turn into a moth," Sola said. She slid hers on, fingers testing the grain. Not silk. There was a grit to it, like very fine wire under wrap. Randy tugged hers experimentally. It didn't stretch. It settled, snug at the kiss of her throat, and for an instant she felt a faint tick, like a tiny gear inside the charm had notched. She blinked. The sensation was gone. The sheriff's smile held a warning shape. "Locals wear them too. Builds community." He tipped his hat toward the window. Outside, 2 shopkeepers crossed the square, ribbons tight against their throats, moving in the same slow, practiced cadence. Tour time. The basement, loading dock, old parade floats, a pipe organ the size of a whale skeleton. "We use it for the haunted concert," the mayor said. "Folks do love their countdowns." He ran fingers along the keys. One low note thrummed the floorboards. Randy's ribbon gave the softest, almost imagined twinge. "Felt that?" Sola murmured. Graves snorted, covering his own hand at his throat like he hadn't. Upstairs, a cracked display label in the Scarecrow hall read HEX before someone had whited it out. Another label described a 19th century Harvest Bride exhibit in neutral curatorial voice, like a story sanded down so it wouldn't catch. "Opening night rehearsals tomorrow," the mayor said, already backing toward the fog. "Parade at midnight soon after. Keep your ribbons on. Tradition." The sheriff's eyes lingered a second too long on their throats, then he tipped away. They locked up at dusk. In the quiet, a motion sensor clicked the Scarecrow hall to life. One animatronic turned its stitched head with a cloth creak and settled again. Graves laughed, too loud. "See? Rent." Randy carried a box past the glass and paused. In the reflection, 3 scarecrows watched her, except the end case was empty. The glass held a silhouette anyway. Tall, wrong, a curved blade resting on a shoulder like a casual thought. "Sola?" Randy whispered. Sola looked up. Empty case, normal reflection. First night jitters. Back at the rental, they toasted plastic cups. The ribbons gleamed like polite smiles. "To the dream job," Graves said. "To keeping our heads," Sola said, casual as a joke. Randy laughed and felt that tiny internal tick again under her fingertips, like something had just agreed. Outside, the fog pressed its face to the window and left a faint, straw-smelling smile. Somewhere between museum and cornfields, something dragged a scythe across asphalt with the patience of a clock. Sleepy Eve did a great small-town face. Tidy porches, hand-painted signs, a main street that smelled permanently of molasses and something roasted. But the more Randy, Graves, and Sola walked, the more they noticed tiny rehearsed things, the way a chorus learns its cues. Mags's Bakery, the sort of place that sold comfort by the dozen, had a window display of sugar skulls and a hand-lettered sign, Heritage Night, ribbons required. The baker, flower blooming in her hair, looped a ribbon tight at her throat while she packed cupcakes with hands that didn't shake. She smiled like someone who practiced for a role. "Do they have a dress code?" Graves asked, watching the ribbon like it might snap if he stared. His badge glinted. He tried to make a joke, and it came out as a string of nervous sarcasm. Sola ducked into a costume shop stacked to the rafters. The owner, a woman with hair like an old poster, moved like a catalog come to life. Her neck was hugged by a ribbon the color of midnight. She tipped a hat at them and said, "Welcome to Sleepy Eve, where we honor the past." The tone was syrupy and the eyes sharp. A flyer nailed to a telephone pole showed an older black and white photo. A woman stitched in straw, a scythe over her shoulder, and a crowd in frock coats. Underneath, someone had scrawled neat letters. "Remember every 50, keep the line." The mayor's handwriting, maybe. The trio swapped looks, part comedic, part hollow, and kept walking. At the town square, a memorial wall rose like a slow ledger. Names, dates, little brass plaques. Some plaques clustered in perfect little decades. 1875, 1925, 1975. Others had a ragged spacing. Every 50 years, a new brass ribbon had been added, shiny, numbered. People stopped by the wall in the afternoon, touched names like rosaries but without prayer, fingers tracing letters and moving on. Graves tapped a plaque with a thumb. "Volunteers," he read, "honors." The lettering was polite. The dates made a pattern that felt like teeth. "Community service?" Sola said. "Extremely festive community service." She laughed too loud. A man in a storefront window looked up and mimicked her laugh, a fraction slower, perfectly paced. They ran into Mayor Clayton again at the antique lamp shop. He offered a guided smile, the kind that smelled of pamphlets and policy. "Our town keeps its heritage close," he said, eyes flicking to their throats as if counting stitches. The sheriff hovered, helpful, steady, his ribbon a neat knot under the collar. "We're proud of our customs," he added, voice thick with civic pride. He said it like an orientation note. A kid racing by with a paper mask tripped, and a woman stooped to tie his shoe. Her hands brushed the ribbon at her neck, and for a blink she shivered, like a chord struck just right. She looked up, embarrassed, as if she'd been caught humming an old hymn. The mayor clapped too early. The small moment folded back into town hum. By dusk, the main street had become a river of black threads at throats. The trio counted at least 36 people wearing the same little onyx wheat charm, all seated at cafe windows, all moving with the same rhythm, when a church bell, old habit, not devotion, chimed at quarter hour. The ribbons sat close enough to kiss skin. Sola filmed a quick cut for social with a whisper. "Sleepy Eve, where even the ribbons have manners." She laughed on camera, and the ribbon at her throat tightened, not painfully, only as if to remind her the town had teeth. Graves slid a hand to his collar and considered undoing it. He didn't. None of them did. The necklace fit like a promise. Snug, polite, and quietly not optional. Outside, in the thickening fog, a silhouette leaned against the cornfield fence, a shape with burlap shoulders and a scythe resting like a punctuation. The figure tilted its head and watched the river of ribbons go by, unseen but ceremonially satisfied. The Halloween museum at night smelled of dust and glue, like paper mache left to rot. The security lights made everything stranger. Pumpkins glowed too orange, shadows too deep. Randy, Graves, and Sola dragged folding chairs into the Scarecrow hall because caffeine tasted better surrounded by nightmare fuel. Graves aimed his flashlight at a Scarecrow in overalls. "Tell me he's not looking at me." Sola raised her coffee. "He is. You're irresistible." The Scarecrow's button eyes glinted in the half-light, stitched mouth stretched into a smile that hadn't been stitched that way earlier. Randy looked too long and felt her ribbon pulse once, a polite hello. CCTV monitors glowed in the lobby. One camera caught the loading dock, empty. Another caught the hall, scarecrows standing in a row. Another caught the stairwell, and for one frame only, there was something else. Burlap shoulders, too tall, scythe blade brushing the wall. Then gone. "Rewind," Randy said. Graves did. Nothing there. Only static and their own reflections. A motion sensor clicked and a scarecrow twitched. Straw fell from its cuff like dandruff. Sola swore under her breath. The sound system hiccuped, and the old pipe organ in the basement coughed a single sour note. All three ribbons gave a simultaneous tug at their throats, like something had tested the fit. Randy's laugh was thin. "So, animatronics glitch, totally fine, totally not haunted." Graves leaned on his chair back. "If I get murdered, put sarcasm killed him on my tombstone." Sola flicked off the monitors. "Don't tempt fate. Fate's got sharper teeth than you." The building settled. Old wood groaned. Then came a different sound. Metal dragged across concrete, slow, patient. The trio froze, listening. Another scrape, closer this time, like something circling the basement. They crept to the stairwell door. Fog crept up the first step, though the night outside was clear. In that fog, faint and deliberate, was a line, cut into the dust. A neat curving scythe mark. "Good news," Graves whispered. "She's Union. She clocks in." The scrape came again, louder now. Too close. Randy slammed the stairwell shut. The latch clicked. For a long beat, silence. Then, knock, knock, knock from the other side, polite as a neighbor. They didn't breathe until the sound slid away into the dark, leaving only the faint scent of straw curling under the door. Randy woke with the taste of iron in her mouth and a small, angry ring around her throat. Sunlight pooled through the blinds like accusation. She fumbled at the ribbon with fingers that felt foreign, sticky, as if the charm had secreted something under the skin. The loop wouldn't slide. When she finally forced it an inch, the silk resisted like a living thing, then eased back as if annoyed she'd bothered. Across the kitchen table, Graves laughed too loud at a joke he'd made last night, trying to shatter the way the world now sat on his ribs. His hand went to his own ribbon and froze. Where his thumb grazed the onyx grain, the metal flinched cold like a tiny animal. A bruise bloomed pale and blue at its edge. not fresh like a pimple, but old and patient under the skin. Sola's phone chimed with a message from an elderly woman at the costume shop. Never cut them. It's worse when you force it. The text felt less like advice than a warning they'd already dismissed. Sola rolled her eyes, shoved the phone face down, and found herself watching a shop window where a mannequin's neck had been ribboned with care. The ribbon there shimmered as if it had been varnished with moonlight. They tried testing it like sensible idiots. Graves took a knife, the cheap one from the drawer, and hovered it beneath the charm. The blade kissed the grain, and nothing happened. He pressed harder. The ribbon tightened instead, the edge pressing into the wood like a whisper. He hissed and threw the knife onto the table. The blade clinked, and a hairline crack spidered down the onyx charm like a smile. At the museum, a volunteer's name came off the memorial wall that morning. Eleanor Price, 1975. Her plaque had been polished, as if someone had just cleaned away dust and memory. They found an old newspaper clipping tucked into the ledger. Honoree collapses during midnight parade. No foul play suspected. No photos showed anything but a woman being supported by neighbors. A caption read, "A sudden fainting spell during the procession." The phrase stuck in Randy's throat like a bone. That night, the trio watched the CCTV feed of last year's parade and froze at the wrong frame. The camera had captured a woman in velvet, neck snapped away from her shoulders in a gentle, clinical arc. The footage blurred, then pixelated, then cut to static as if someone had taped over the past. They found a private comment tucked behind the museum's volunteer posting, a note from a former curator. "The ribbons are soft if you are chosen. They sing louder if you are not." The email header was unsigned and the server timestamp was years in the past. The message felt like a feathered threat. Randy's throat itched. She tried not to think about velvet or scythes or the way fabric could be a noose disguised as a handshake. When laughter broke out at the diner up the street, it sounded too bright, like someone trying to distract a room full of knives. That night, a delivery driver missed their stop and backed around the square in a confusion of headlights. He pulled his collar up too high when he walked by the museum and refused to meet their eyes. Later, their neighbor complained of a strange, polite knock at his door at midnight and found only a ribbon on the stoop, not tied tight and warm, as if someone had been wearing it and left it behind satisfied. The ribbons, it turned out, didn't always wait for midnight. Sometimes they whispered in the day. Sometimes they tightened with a laugh. Sometimes they left marks under thin skin like a reminder to behave. Sola woke one morning with a tiny pinprick of blood at her collarbone. Her fingers came away with a single black pin lodged under her thumbnail like someone had left a signature. The pin smelled faintly of earth and rust. She swallowed, and the taste of it sat thick as a dare. Outside, in the field near the corn, something moved. A shoulder, a scythe edge catching sun like a blade learning the noon. The town practiced its smiles. The ribbons practiced their claim. The trio found themselves counting teeth as if people were math problems, and horror was just a solution they had to work out between coffee and payroll. They'd thought the charm was a charm. They were wrong. It was a system with teeth. Rehearsal was meant to be a show of civic pride, floats polished like teeth, children in pumpkin costumes practicing their theatrical gasps, and the mayor standing on the bandstand with a script he'd memorized to the last syrupy syllable. The town turned out in its Sunday best Halloween, ribbons gleaming at throats like a field of tiny, obedient moons. Randy, Graves, and Sola stood off to the side with a crate of paper lanterns and a plan to hand out museum flyers. They watched the honorees file onto the float, people chosen from the brass plaques on the memorial wall, smiling stiffly, and tried to pretend the whole thing was kitsch and not a slow-motion trap. The parade music started, practiced and too bright, and the crowd clapped in rehearsed waves. The mayor cleared his throat for the countdown. 10, 9, 8. At the float's edge, a woman in velvet, older, proud, lifted her chin as the crowd cheered. Her heritage ribbon gleamed at the hollow of her throat, snug as if sewn in place. She raised a hand, and the mayor smiled like a man who loves ceremonies more than questions. 5, 4. Randy noticed first. The ribbon at the woman's throat brightened, a small, soundless flare under the silk. The woman's smile flickered. Her hand went up and then down like a puppet whose strings had been tugged by invisible fingers. Her head bowed a fraction as if listening to an instruction only she could hear. 3, 2. Graves muttered something about stage fright. Sola clenched the flyers till the edges bent, heartbeat loud in her throat. The woman's fingers flexed. For a blink, her shoulders hunched as if she'd taken a hit she hadn't expected. 1. Her eyes closed. Then, in a motion so soft it almost looked ceremonial, her chin tilted further, and the world, trained for explanation, tried to file it away as a trick of the fog. A rustle, a polite mechanical crack, shivered through the float. The woman's head gave, not like a fall, but like a hinge reluctantly releasing. The crowd's cheer staggered into silence. Someone swallowed hard. A toddler began a confused cry that the mayor tried uselessly to smother with a practiced smile. The woman did not collapse with blood and carnage. She settled, gentle and final, as if someone had folded a page and set it aside. The ribbon lay slack. The velvet pooled like a dark stain. For a single awful second, the only sound was the band's drum sticking, a beat that had lost its drummer. Panic moved like a contagion. People screamed. The mayor barked into his microphone, voice fraying with the tiniest unnatural calm. Please, please remain. Move along. No need for alarm. His syllables were exact, too measured, as if he were cutting words to fit a pattern he preferred. The sheriff stepped forward with a hand raised and a face that said, "We are in control," because saying otherwise would be admitting the thing was larger than a man. Randy pushed through the crowd, ignoring hands, ignoring the way people's heads turned away like they were trying not to see a secret. She peered over the float edge and saw the woman's throat, smooth, unbroken, a tiny dark ring where the necklace had been pressed, and a small smear of something like rust at the collar. There was no gore, but the image sat in Randy's stomach like a live coal. Someone from the crowd started to chant, not in protest, not yet in prayer, but in a low curricular rhythm that made the hairs on Randy's arms stand up. The mayor stepped back from the microphone and smiled again, his eyes fast and bright in a way that felt practiced. In his pocket, Randy thought she might have seen the glint of a pin, black and small, like those Sola had found earlier. The honorees' caretakers, neighbors who'd been given the role of escort, moved with the same mechanical calm as the mayor, They lifted the velvet body carefully and carried her away like a package. The float rolled on, the band resumed with the same marchy cheer, and murmurs braided into the rear of the crowd as if everyone had agreed to forget the exact moment everything went wrong. Randy felt the ribbon at her own throat hum, a ghostly vibration that answered the town's low, learned rhythm. She thought of the ledger and the brass plaques and the neat half-centuries carved into metal. She thought of the mayor's hands and the sheriff's steady gaze. She slipped a finger under the charm. It didn't cut. It pressed, not violent but insistent, a reminder that some agreements are stitched into skin. Behind the bandstand, in the fog where corn stalks leaned like curious neighbors, something moved with the slow satisfaction of something that had been fed. They pried the museum's archives like kids stealing candy from a locked tin. The back room smelled of old paper and something sour that might have been memory. Stacks of ledgers, brittle festival programs, and a cedar box labeled Local Legends leaned against a pipe organ the size of a whale. Sola tugged a dusty lamp into place, and the light made the dust motes look like tiny ghosts. Graves pulled gloves on like a man who'd done stupid things before and wanted to keep his hands honest. Amy, Randy in their world, but Amy was a sound they didn't use here, flipped pages while Sola read aloud headlines in a voice that tried to be ironic and kept catching on the wrong words. Harvest bride vanishes, town mourns, Scarecrow display donated to museum. The tone scrubbed history down until it was wallpaper. In the ledger's margins, ink clung like dried blood. A curator long gone had scribbled notes. She loved him. He loved stories more. Do not display her face, it answers. The words felt less like notes than like a tissue folded around a shard. They found the photograph eventually. A young woman in a plain dress, hair at her throat, smiling like someone about to be wed. Someone had scrawled a circle around her neck in pen and written, "Keep the ribbon close." The scrawl slanted like a warning left in a hurry. Sola thumbed through a brittle town meeting transcript from 1875. The mayor, then an ancestor perhaps, argued in measured sentences about property and appearances. A small paragraph lingered. We shall bind her in memory. We shall ask our own to bind themselves in turn. It is less messy, less messy. The phrase was antiseptic and obscene, and it sat on the page like a bargain. That's not tradition, Graves muttered, voice low. That's civic butchery. Practical municipal solutions, the mayor of 1875 would have said, and they imagined him polishing brass as the violinists tuned for a funeral. Tucked behind brittle newspaper clippings, they found a ledger of donations, names and numbers, and beside certain entries, a tiny notch. Every 50 years, notches clustered like teeth. The pattern matched the plaques on the memorial wall. Someone had drawn a map in the margin with careless grief. The old mill, then the parish field, then an X under the hill, the feeding ground, the handwriting said, the ink smeared almost apologetically. Sola's finger landed on a line that read like a dare. She's not a ghost to be placated. She is a consequence. Cut the mouth and the town will forget how to sing. The sentence ended in a blot, as if whoever had written it had been interrupted by hands that would not stop shaking. Graves found a small tin folded into cloth, a charm box. Inside, pins, black, faceted, each the size of a thumbnail. One pin had a curl of straw trapped in corrosion. The pins matched the one Sola had found under her nail. They were not jewelry. They were a language. They cross-referenced names and dates, mapping each notch to an absence. The ledger was not a comfort book. It was a ledger of deals made in polite ink. The town had chosen to paper over betrayal and turned a woman's death into a civic apparatus. "We don't bribe monsters," Sola said softly. "We stop enabling them." "How?" Graves asked. He hated the edge in his voice. He hated how the question had the shape of a dare. He hated that he could feel the ribbon tight at his own throat, as if the town had preemptively hugged him. Amy folded the map, the ink smudging on her thumb like a bruise, and slid it into her jacket. "We find her center," she said. "We take away the bell she rings with. We cut the cords." The plan sounded brave in the light, but like a superstition in the stillness of the archive. Outside, in the fog, something moved in the corn like a hand retying a knot. The town hummed its practiced tune, and for a breath, the trio understood the scale of the lie they'd inherited. They left the archives with paper cuts and an answer that tasted like metal. The ledger had given them a compass. Under the hill, under the bell, where a mouth waited to be sealed. They treated it like science because jokes made it bearable. Graves tied his ribbon to a doorknob and tugged. It didn't stretch. It didn't fray. It tightened. His neck burned like someone had flicked a match at his skin. He yanked the knot loose and laughed too loud, shaky. "Okay, not silk." Randy set a lighter under her charm. Heat made the onyx grain tremble. The ribbon pulsed once, like a heartbeat, then cooled back down on its own. The bruise at her throat darkened. She swore and slammed the lighter shut. Sola dragged the portable speaker from the haunted concert setup. "Let's try rhythm." She cued the pipe organ recording from last year. The first note shook the floorboards. Their ribbons all gave a tug in unison, like leashes pulled tight. Then she detuned the pitch, dragging it lower, deeper, until the sound warbled ugly. The ribbons loosened just a fraction, as if the song had said the wrong word in the right sentence. They all looked at each other. For once, no one joked. That night, the fog came heavier, curling under doors, sliding over porch rails like it knew the layout. The sheriff's patrol car idled outside the museum, headlights dim. He didn't knock. He didn't leave. He just sat there, ribbon neat against his collar, watching. In the cornfield, something moved. Not the shuffle of wind. A steady drag, scythe through soil, a lantern glow flickered once, then winked out. Randy thought she saw a stitched face between the stalks, but when she blinked, it was gone. Sola's phone buzzed. "Unknown number, test passed, come out." They didn't. They huddled by the organ instead, cords snaking across the floor, volume knobs maxed, waiting for a rhythm they could sabotage. At midnight, the knocking began again, polite, patient. 3 times at the museum's glass doors. Graves muttered, "Sorry," closed, but his voice cracked because something on the other side of the glass was breathing straw. The fog pressed harder. The organ gave a low drone on its own, a key pressed by no hand. Their ribbons trembled like dogs smelling blood. Then a shape shifted in the corn, A silhouette tall and narrow, scythe balanced like a violin bow. She didn't step forward. She waited. She always waited. And for the first time, Randy understood the town wasn't obsessed with Hexa. The town was practiced. Halloween Eve turned the town into theater. Strings of orange bulbs swung across Main Street, paper skeletons dangled from lampposts, and the smell of cider tried to cover the fog. The parade was supposed to start at midnight. It started early, 10 minutes, then 15. The countdown clocks in shop windows blinked out of sync, each one shaving seconds like someone was hungry for time. The mayor waved from his float, ribbon snug at his throat. The sheriff tossed candy, eyes glazed. Kids wore Scarecrow masks with stitched mouths, giggling through the holes. Randy, Graves, and Sola pressed into the crowd, ribbons prickling like static. Their plan, if it could be called that, was to stay visible, stay sarcastic, stay alive. Then the organ started, not from the museum, from everywhere. The street lamps hummed the bass note, car horns joined in, sour and deep. The town vibrated like a body preparing to gag. Fog split down the parade route, a corridor carved itself open. And through it, she came. Hexa. Her burlap face was sewn in mockery of a bride, mouth a permanent slash. Straw leaked from her throat where her lover had cut her centuries ago. Her scythe glinted slick, catching every bulb like it had its own spotlight. The crowd didn't scream. They cheered. Ribbons glowing faintly, they raised their hands as if greeting royalty. One man broke his necklace in half, head snapping forward as his body slumped. Applause thundered. Hexa's head tilted. She saw the trio immediately, ribbons tight, eyes wide. She didn't walk toward them. She ran. The scythe hissed through the air. Randy shoved Graves aside. The blade kissed the pavement, sparks spraying. Sola yanked them into an alley, boots pounding on wet brick. Behind them, the scrape came steady, patient, but faster than they could run. They burst into the museum's back door, slamming it shut. The organ inside began to play without a player, pipes rattling dust. Their ribbons pulsed in rhythm with the chords. Graves pressed his back against the door. She's not part of the parade, she is the parade. And then, through the walls, came her laugh. Dry, crackling straw on fire. The Scarecrow hall didn't look like papier-mâché anymore. In the dark, every mannequin seemed to lean closer, burlap masks sagging with a wet weight. The organ's bass note shook the floorboards like a giant's pulse. Their ribbons cinched hard, not tugging, cutting. Thin lines of red bled through cotton, soaking collars. Randy clawed at hers, nails tearing skin, but it only tightened in reply, like laughter in rope form. Graves kicked over a Scarecrow, its straw guts spilled out, but inside, tangled in the stuffing, was a necklace just like theirs, rows of them hidden in effigies, waiting. "They're stockpiling us," he rasped. "We're merchandise." The museum doors blew open. Wind and fog roared inside, scattering candy wrappers and funeral programs. Townsfolk spilled in with perfect choreography. Mayor first, sheriff next, children in masks after. Their faces were lit with devotion, not fear. "Time," the mayor crooned. "Every 50 years, time to renew." Hexa slid in behind them. Her scythe trailed the floor, throwing sparks like flint on steel. She towered over the mannequins, over the crowd, eyes stitched shut yet somehow seeing. Randy tried sarcasm, habit, shield. Cool parade float. Did you get it on Etsy? Hexa's head cocked. The scythe lifted, slow as an eclipse. Sola yanked the organ's cord out of the wall. The pipes shrieked, wrong note, sour and ugly. Their ribbons slackened for a breath, just enough to pull air into their lungs again. The crowd hissed in unison, as if the town itself disapproved. The sheriff lunged forward, trying to force the plug back in. Graves tackled him into a pile of straw. The man didn't fight like a cop. He fought like a puppet, strings jerking. Hexa stepped into the hall. Her shadow swallowed the trio whole. She raised the scythe high, blade gleaming, straw fingers tightening on the hilt. The ribbons cinched again, burning, whispering against their throats. Choose, break, bleed. Randy locked eyes with her friends. Not tonight. And she grabbed the nearest mannequin, ripped its ribbon free, and hurled it at Hexa's feet. The Scarecrow's head tumbled off clean, rolling across the floor. The town gasped like one throat cut open. Hexa stopped mid-swing, tilted her burlap head, and for the first time she smiled. The smile stretched too wide, seams popping like old stitches. Hexa leaned into it, scythe dragging sparks, every step deliberate. The trio backed toward the organ, ribbons biting deeper, warm blood sliding under collars. The crowd parted like worshippers, no screams. Just patience. Sola yanked the folded map from her jacket, the ledger's smeared ink, the X under the hill. Her center, she hissed. We cut the cord there. Hexa's scythe slashed the air. The map split clean in half before Sola could blink. Paper drifted down like confetti at a funeral. New plan, Graves shouted, grabbing the organ's keyboard and pounding out wrong notes, ugly and raw. The sound was a wound. Their ribbons loosened, then snapped tight again, angrier. Randy's chest burned. Her sarcasm faltered. If we're mannequins in training, screw it. Let's break the bride. She lunged at Hexa, not with a weapon, but with the mannequin's charm pin still lodged in straw. She drove it into the burlap chest, where a heart might beat. Hexa convulsed, straw spilled. The scythe crashed against the floor, sparks skittering up the walls. The crowd wailed, their ribbons glowing red-hot. Sola and Graves grabbed the other pins, ramming them into burlap seams. Hexa staggered, body splitting at the stitches. Her laugh warped into a shriek, metallic and endless. The ribbons around the trio's throats burst open. No snap, no cut. They simply dissolved into ash, leaving burns shaped like nooses. Hexa collapsed into a heap of straw, scythe clattering silent. The museum lights flickered, organs sputtering into quiet. The townsfolk slumped where they stood, eyes dull, ribbons blackened. For a breath, it was over. Then the pile twitched. Straw writhed. The scythe shivered on the floor. From within the heap, a voice like rust whispered, "Every 50 years or every night, it makes no difference. I am planted too deep." The heap pulsed once, like a seed under soil. The trio bolted from the hall into the fog, ribbons gone but throats raw, hearts hammering. Behind them, the museum groaned, beams bending like something was growing inside. They survived. But the town had already chosen them. And somewhere under the hill, Hexa was rooting in. Epilogue. Dawn limped into sleepy eve, gray and thin. Fog clung to the eaves like cobwebs that refused to burn away. The parade float still lined Main Street, half collapsed, their papier-mâché faces sagging in silence. Randy, Graves, and Sola walked out of town with no bags, no museum keys, only the burns etched high on their necks like permanent collars. They didn't speak. Every joke felt broken. Behind them, the Halloween Museum stood quiet. Its windows glowed faintly, as if a lantern had been left on inside. In the Scarecrow Hall, the scythe lay where it had fallen, yet every time the fog shifted, the blade gleamed wet. The townsfolk swept streets, hung banners, smiled their tired smiles. No one mentioned the ribbons, no one mentioned the bodies. They just hummed, under their breath, the same low note the organ had played. That night, long after the trio had driven away, the fog thickened again. Children in stitched masks paraded down the street with no music, no floats, no parents. Only fog. And in the museum's glass door, a reflection waited. Burlap smile, straw hair. A throat that never stopped bleeding. Sleep tight and check your neck, because in Sleepy Eve, the ribbon never asks, it only takes.